let's talk about one of the biggest, riskiest geopolitical gambles in modern history. We're talking about a game where the future of an entire nation is sitting right there on the table.
You know, the source material we're looking at puts it in such a vivid way. It's not just politics as usual. This is a bet that puts a country's alliances, its economy, its entire place in the world on the line. And at the head of that table pushing all the chips in is one man, Benjamin Netanyahu.
So that really brings us to the core question of this whole explainer, right? It's what the entire world is trying to figure out. Is this some masterstroke, a calculated move to win it all? Or is this just a desperate bluff with consequences that are almost impossible to imagine?
Okay, so to really get a handle on just how bold this gamble is, we have to first understand the man who's making the bet. Because you'll see every single move he makes is shaped by this unique mix of intense political pressure and, well, personal ambition.
This timeline really tells you everything you need to know. It's a story of survival for sure, but it's also a story of pressure that's just been building and building. I mean, Netanyahu has been navigating political minefields for 4 decades, but right now he's in a perfect storm. He's got a corruption trial that's been hanging over his head since 2019. He's facing widespread blame for the national trauma of October 7th, and on top of all that, his approval ratings are tanking, with elections potentially just around the corner.
So here's the question that a lot of analysts are asking. Is the timing of this huge conflict with Iran just a response to a threat that's always been there? Or is it a strategic move, a way to totally change the subject from all his problems at home and paint himself as the indispensable wartime leader that Israel has to have?
All right, so if that's the motivation, let's take a closer look at the cards he's actually playing. What does his hand really look like when you consider both the military side and the diplomatic side of things?
From a purely military standpoint, the results on paper actually look pretty impressive. You've got Operation Lion's Roar, which reportedly dealt a major blow to Iran's nuclear ambitions. Israel's air force is completely dominant, and Iran's network of proxies around the region has definitely been weakened. So on the surface, it kind of looks like he's holding some winning cards. But this slide just lays out the central problem with his whole gamble so perfectly. For every military ace he seems to be holding, there's a diplomatic joker right next to it. Yeah, he's weakened the proxies, but in the process, he's alienated key allies. He's gained more military control, but that's led to massive regional condemnation and a very, very real risk of being left totally isolated.
And this right here, this is where the gamble gets really dangerous. Netanyahu's whole vision of a new Middle East absolutely depends on making peace with major Arab countries. But the biggest prize of them all, Saudi Arabia, has drawn a very clear line in the sand. They're saying no deal without a path to a Palestinian state, which is something his current government is completely against. So that door, for now, seems slammed shut.
And of course, we can't forget the crisis that set all of this in motion. The war in Gaza just keeps grinding on, with no clear endgame in sight. The territory is in ruins, and most tragically, the hostages are still being held. It's this constant, painful reality check that just completely undermines any claim he makes of a decisive victory.
So, as if holding a handful of contradictions wasn't hard enough, there are also these wild cards in the deck, these unpredictable factors, both at home and abroad, that could just flip the whole table over.
The first, and maybe the biggest, wildcard is public opinion right here in the United States, Israel's most critical ally. As you can see from this Gallup data, American sympathies have been shifting in a really dramatic way, especially among younger people. It's fueled by the images coming out of the conflict and a changing political conversation. This is a huge deal because it eats away at the very bedrock of political support that Israel has counted on for decades. And that shift in public opinion, it's absolutely being felt at the very top. It really looks like Netanyahu and the Trump administration are playing 2 completely different games. Netanyahu seems to be playing for the history books, looking for a long, legacy-defining conflict. Trump, on the other hand, seems to want a quick win, lower oil prices, and something he can declare victory on and just move on.
And that leads to a pretty terrifying question for Israel's leadership. I mean, let's be honest, Netanyahu needs Trump way more than Trump needs Netanyahu. So what happens if America just decides, okay, our goals are met, and pulls back its support? Israel simply cannot keep this conflict going by itself.
When you step back and look at the big picture, what you're seeing is this unbelievable high-wire act. He's waging a war on multiple fronts while trying to keep this fragile far-right coalition together. A coalition that nearly blew up over the Haredi draft law, which is this super explosive issue about drafting ultra-Orthodox men into the army. Add to that fighting his own legal battles, navigating strained alliances, it's a lot. As one former official put it, he might be a master tactician, but is he a master strategist? That's the real question.
So all of this, it brings us to the final bet. And this isn't just about winning or losing a war anymore. This is about the kind of future that Israel is choosing for itself in the 21st century. The sources really lay out two completely different endings to this story. In the best-case scenario, for Netanyahu that is, he pulls it off. Iran is weakened, the hostages come home, he gets that deal with Saudi Arabia, and he wins a snap election, cementing his legacy. But in the worst-case scenario, the war just drags on, his alliances fall apart, his government collapses, and he loses everything. And this is what's truly at stake here. In that worst-case scenario, it is not just Netanyahu who loses. The real price is paid by Israel. The country could come out of this as a military giant, yes, but also as a diplomatic outcast, economically hurt, and more alone on the world stage than has ever been.
And that leads to this final, pretty haunting thought from the source material. When you make a bet this big, the risk isn't just that you lose all your chips. The real risk is that you break the entire table, destabilizing the whole region for a generation.
So, Netanyahu has placed his bet. All the chips are in the middle. But for Israel and for the entire Middle East, the wheel is still spinning. The question is, when it finally stops, who's going to be left to pick up the pieces?